has been a week, or so, I guess. I've had a few internet problems. So we start with the first thing is okay, why? Two things are happening right now. It looks like the Kathleen Kennedy and also the Kardashians, along with their their goal to gain control over over a certain sect of the LA music scene and house music, and the control over the supply lines. I guess I guess it's the out of Mexico and their cartels, which still fits within something I stated at the very beginning. Is Kennedy is her nominal or her normal attack is, or persons who think in this externalization process is here's the emotion, I'll give you the emotion, and they'll take the asset. And so she's viewing that as the asset, and then trying to get me all caught up in this whole thing with voting rights. I still the main asset, unfortunately for her, is my brand and my name. So what will happen is I will go to California, and then both the cartels and any type of organization, anything will be I'll be attacked, and that at point gives me leverage over Miss Kennedy and the Kardashians, and of course the, as they found the new Miss Lewis as well, as they found new ways of gaslighting using Instagram, the stories, because it goes off in 24 hours. So Bolo is actually Holly Noel's husband. So would it be go into Holly's house? It's basically Ty saying I have control over him. Everything is done as a visual. You're dealing with a child, a bunch of children. The good news is all the actions that they're doing, and the reason I keep pressing that, because it tells me what Trump and the Republicans are going to do, because they are externalizations. Now, the second thing is dealing with Lady Markle, who is probably extremely pissed off, as well as Prince Harry, but that's fine. I can guarantee you Queen Elizabeth II understands why am still pressing. And it is up to Lady Markle, if she ever grows the capacity and courage, she might or may not, more than likely not at the present. And it's not against her, it is an understanding that, because for instance, I didn't take the course last week at $300 for trading because I can't have them because I still know him. I know that Mr. Box is probably still working with him, so therefore it would be him. Mr. Box would have the ability to then say it was because of us. It went from I can do that. Use your systems after I have my systems that work consistently. Now I think I have them, but to go from where it is zero to that creates a power situation, and power abhors a vacuum. So what seems like a silly action or a mistake, it was not. It was actually a very strategic action. So and so now, so so you have, and that's the same thing coming back to Lady Markle. It is she. That's what I said. 2 years, disappear for 2 years, do these things, get out of Hollywood, move to an area that is different. Basically, find out who your friends are, true friends in Hollywood are, when you're away from them. I think she's moved to LA. I'm pretty sure. I might have to do my research. I can remember that. Might be wrong. If I'm wrong, then I can understand that as far as not being in LA. But there is a pool of LA around her. There is a energy. Because if there's not LA, it's definitely the meme set. If it's going on in, if you're already in Silicon Valley, because Californians have that same personality. It's just very, very toxic, more towards LA as opposed. It's still toxic and, but not as grimy toxic. It's more white collar, but still just as, yeah, it's still externalizations. but it gives them the ability to maintain more control. Now it is understanding. Maybe Markle does not understand. Probably thinks I'm just that's crazy, which is fine. I'm used to being considered nuts. Just gives if she understands it, if she ever understands it, I cannot. It's a question. I can't. I can say I can put it in words, but it is not for me to give her for her to understand the wording, to understand what is the meaning behind why this action to be done in this manner. And I can also understand that as an American, no one's going to tell me what to do, and as a Duchess, no one's going to tell me what to do. Yeah, I totally agree with that. But doing this has more purpose for you, for her, and for Harry than even politics. There's so many pieces and thing, and I and rolled into the action of going to finishing school. Speaking of which, and also meeting with the Queen at this point in the time frame, the timeline. And then, as well as also, I already told you about the political point of learning how to put together these deals in a manner that when you hear them as more capital opportunities are presented, you don't have to go working for someone. They work for you. It's a different dynamic. And so the next thing is now we know, of course, Lady Middleton and Lady Camilla are very quite pleased with me as well. So I really don't care as well as either. Yes, the Game of Thrones is ruthless and is brutal. It's mean. It's cruel. It is petty. It's small. It's super ego. It's at its at whatever it is. But that is the way it is. That is just the game. History is called. How we answer is up to us. So we now know after last week's setback, or yeah, call it a setback, call it for what it is. We now know where everyone stands. Okay, Morning Joe is stating, well, it's been stated, being reported by regulars, more liberal, as they would say, I'd say centrist actually, media outlets. Okay, after saying, go see what they are doing in the if they basically Mansion and Cinema are basically being upheld by the white right wing media echo chamber, and that was expected. I said that as well, but the situation is better because now you know where that they are not on board. There, it shows racism or phenotype of thinking is part of the Republican brand. They know. I almost guarantee you they know a majority of both the Senate and the House were part of the insurrection and part of the coup actively by the former president Donald Trump. And so they're trying to protect their own butts. And so they need to win in the midterms and pick up seats in the Senate in both. To do that, the families apparently thinking, as always, thinking, not thinking, this is the same shit that happened with Hitler, thinking they can contain or control. And we know the history of basically turning people into slaves through anti-unionization efforts and all that. I remember, I was just watching a video to remind me of a book about the Rockefellers I was reading years ago, and Henry Ford as well. Was it and JP? Wasn't it JP Morgan? Who was it? He went to Europe because he knew his guy was gonna start a war to break the union. So unionization, between capital and unions, slave labor and free labor. You know, free labor is a pain. Let's get real. You can get somebody, just put them in as a cog, and you don't have to deal with them when they're done. Purely as a mechanization position, it makes more sense. I can see that with how the Koch brothers, when reading their books, trained as an engineer, views people as just as businesses as nothing more than cogs and things like that. And there are emotive cogs and there's logic cogs, and emotions are a logical subset of self. It's a stacking of self as opposed to just a linear A to B point of self. So there's a logic statement within that could be formalized, which is so when I say that the emotion logic and regular logic. And so we can see that as we're going to talk about emotion logic, because right now, so let's go to where we're at. We know voting rights because Putin is using the divisions from the NRA, all these divisions within the religious far right, stoking their whole ideology of Jesus is returning, and they got to create crappy ground for it to happen, for to force the rapture or whatever. And even though the whole Protestant, there's a lot of the Protestant ideas are when they're not overly connected to, I mean, a lot of the Protestants, like even the Southern Anabaptist, even though they are set up in a nonlinear, supposedly nonlinear fashion, they're actually run as a linear command stream fashion. And so you see this same situation has happened within the Republican Party, where Trump or any person has just put themselves into the command position in that hierarchical indoctrination, and then say freedom, but freedom for me to tell you to put somebody else into a structure within a psychological hierarchical organization, as opposed to viewing as a person as an individual, and then deeming how that you wish to deal with them. So we have, all right. So this is what we're gonna talk right here, and then so right now this is on Fox. This is Utah's other senator, and everyone's all foxified. That's their fox hair and everything. They get it all Sunday best giddy up. It's the southern. It reminds me of growing up. It's the whole southern fried. Gotta get the coiffed hair thing. It's quite hilarious. You can see it a mile away, but that's the foxified brand. And then angry. And they're just angry. It's just really strange. I don't really care. Now, see, here's what he said. That's their thing. Silence Americans and seize power. So essentially, right there, they're telling you what their goal is. They've externalized it onto the Democrats, and they're telling you what they're planning on doing. They're going to silence Americans and seize power. Silence African, silence, because when we think of voting rights, because we're always thinking it's African Americans, but when you go back into the Klein Center, you not the Klein Center, you go back into looking at these maps, you're seeing that it's not. It's mostly It's northern states. It's all. It's just. It's they would do it to all states, but it's anybody who doesn't vote for their person. Essentially, they've made it more difficult to go vote, and we know from their own words that voting is is anathema because it's the policies. Even if you believe in small business, you go make it your own way. You believe in the whole ideology of America. Corporates don't really do that. And if you lose that soil of small business and and individuals banding together, you actually just like it's like strip mining, and you remove the the, the nutrients of ideas, and that actually become a monoculture. We become very dangerous for ourselves in the future. So we use voting rights because the thing is, what we've learned over the last year is how the power families use racism, or bigotry more precisely, to control Caucasoid Americans. And they use the worst part, as we've seen with Kathleen Kennedy, dealing with the gang gang member trying to take over the LA underground house scene, and then keep me distracted from going back into learning my music, so I can start other things I'm working on, and then trying to steal my shit, get me to work on my business plan, and then steal my business plan and hand it to this guy. It's simple, normal, freaking externalizing type people behavior, basically toddlers. So even though that's exact, so it's like the same feces, different pile. Obviously, it's always worked. You could see it within history, and once you understand, you're like, oh, this person's a crappy human being, and it just makes sense. So they're gonna hide behind. So we know what they're gonna do. We know how they've been hammering at everything. That in voting rights, they're going after young people. They're going after older people, and they're going after anyone who cannot be anyone who has a different opinion. That's un-American. But then they're making it difficult for people to vote throughout the country, therefore lowering the amount of votes, and therefore making it easier for unpopular programs, and then gives them a slogan. But they got to give it to them. They're very disciplined in their messaging, and the messaging behind the filibuster, or the this is oh wow, yeah, we're making life miserable. Good. This is where they always do alliterations within there. Very good with doing it. Silence Americans and seize power. Externalize and accuse. Place the chips. And now the idea is you have to defend this position out in the reality. No. Republicans are silencing Americans and seizing power. And then they're and then they're and then using implied fear mongering. They're saying, "Oh, those minorities are harassing this good white guy," when his systems, if it wasn't for Fox News and everything, all of these things from Build Back Better to voting rights actually give more power to the average American voter who's Caucasian. So the main thing now is we have the good news is we know who's who in the zoo. This is what they're after. They don't want national level floor voting, mail in voting, redistricting, um, you fair redistricting. They don't want the things that the average American wants. So they're going to give a lot of platitudes, get people angry, It was funny. I was reading. There's a person on Facebook, and then they had all these old, George Orwell books out, and I'm thinking to myself, did we read completely different books? Did we read because the Handmaid's Tale? I was like, these books. When I remember reading them, your behavior was what got us to what's being told about in those books, but you don't see it. And then you see some others who are starting to realize, that book burning thing's not really all that smart. Yeah, you think? But as long as they keep people angry, they're they're going to keep that fear going. Right now, we have certain things going on in Taiwan and Ukraine, and yes, they are both linked. There are some who say China will not attack until after the Winter Olympics. That probably makes sense. My main thing is thinking, okay, is NATO going to get bogged down? Can Russia bog down NATO in Ukraine? They know their positions as far as, say, get off of the border, blah blah blah. We're to tell these you and all these countries what to do. That's not going to work. So it's a matter of how far is Putin willing to push, or how far is America and the West willing to push back on Putin. Putin has, over the last decade or so, insulated his economy from sanctions, but it's still a kleptocracy that can't grow because just like you have the secret life of trees and the mother tree and every different things, you have to connect and trade, and that's the lifeblood of these countries. Well, every country is trade, even as insular as we wish. China is still being insular, but it's still very trade heavy, and it's right now it's flexing its muscle. It's showing that it's big. It's a superpower, and Xi's not going to die before he's good. His goal is to take over Taiwan, be the one who defeated the Republic of China, or better known as Taiwan. But the thing is, also what they're doing is they're bullying companies. We saw that now. Them telling 7-Eleven, well, if it was in country, you can kind of go, all right, whatever, dude. But I, but what they do is they keep harassing until you comply or whatever, and then they just end up doing it all over. And so as they've been whittling away at Taiwan's autonomy throughout the world stage in the UN and everything else, using leverage and money, it's going to continue doing the same thing. Will there be a full scale war? I don't know. That's up to diplomats who spent their lives trying to understand and diffuse such conflicts. But Putin's a bully. This is the reason that if the January 6th committee does not hold those accountable and allows the process that's been placed in the next toddler gets into office and says, well, I don't want to leave, I'll just use police systems unless Congress acts fully, not just on the part where, you know, the, right now Murkowski wants to say, well, we'll work on the Electoral Count Act because that affects us, but we're not going to allow you to control the votes, which is funny. Or, we have a former American president quoting Stalin when Trump was stating it's not about who votes but who counts the votes. That was Stalin. That was Vladimir Stalin, if it's Vladimir Stalin. And Lenin was terrified of Stalin. And when he died, he knew that he couldn't speak. And imagine now knowing, and now he can see Stalin, really the snake that he was. He he wanted to warn people about Stalin, and he couldn't do it. Just that's what I've read. That's much about and he knew that Stalin was really horrific, and now you have a former president quoting Stalin. And these are the same thinking processes. When you have kings and queens, they're quick to go to war because they think they are the state, the state à moi, instead of je. Instead of I am the state is me, and that's how they think, and that is a very dangerous way of thinking. Those who externalized, you don't exist. You are there to dump their emotion sets into. Metaphysically, I can say it in other ways, but I'm gonna keep it that way. So right now, we've lost voting rights for this year. But the next thing is apparently to break up the Build Back Better and the Voting Rights Bill, which I think is quite novel. It makes sense, and make people vote on individual parts. Put it into quarters. The first quarter should be like, okay, this part of the voting rights, and then this part of the Build Back Better, and just constantly keep the drum beat of bringing it to the floor and hearing the Republicans say no. No, we're against child tax credit. No, we're against your of paying for good schools. No, we're against. Make them run on being the party of no. Right now, Biden's approval rating is in the tank. It's dropping, both against Democrats and independents. Why? Because it seems like nothing is getting done. And technically, you have these two senators who are they're from purple states, and because I know for a fact, you Manchin's probably all said, "You called me a bigot." Well, you did my definition of the actions of a person who is a bigot. You did not go into negotiations with a in good faith. You did gaslight two different times, and one of those gaslights was distinctively the blacks are coming for your money, and then you gaslight with Raphael Warnock. You did actions that you would not have taken. The whole goal was to avoid voting rights. So you want to keep your people from voting, holding you accountable. And but you know them, and looking at your pictures, you're looking at the local miners, and you're just like you view them as pure suckers, straight up. You view them as pure suckers, and he's like, "How you don't know me?" No, okay, we'll have a conversation. I have no qualms. We can have a conversation and face to face. I have no qualms with that. I'm actually more dangerous face to face. We're all smart here. That's the thing that irks you more than anything. I am not supposed to exist, but I exist. Just like what pisses off Kennedy, as she's trying to get them, but not realizing it's always an attack on my brand. And I'm not willing to give away my IP as my school, as my former university did stole my IP, my intellectual property and ideas, counter to what's expected of them. And I know the power of what those ideas were and how it affected history. This has gotten stranger and fucking stranger. Let me tell you. So then we have Christian Cinema, and right as I said, right out of Mesa, out of Scottsdale, It's still bigotry. Let's get real. It's a soft bigotry, but it's still bigotry because it's still saying because it's still implied on the voting rights. Okay, so what do we got to do? What has to be done? Even though, so the Republicans who seem to be more worried about becoming fascists than being Republicans and building things for business are completely bought out by old big money, big corporate money, and dark money, which needs to get out of it. After seeing this, it's totally America's going backwards. It's being pushed to an authoritarian right because of large corporate capital. Because people don't realize Hitler realized he needed to get the establishment on board before he could take over, and that's exactly what the first 4 years of Trump's were: paying everybody off, basically bribing everybody with the tax cuts and everything else. And you would hear them in the reporting. So something's more draconian, something's more horrible. Oh, wait until the next. We'll just wait until the next term. This is not going to end well. We don't, if they can't be stopped. It took a year. I gotta give it to them. I gotta give it to the families. They have you right now. What Kennedy's trying to set up with her and the Kardashians is their cash cow is on African Americans being poor, psychologically poor, and the culture of that poverty, which is even more so, which is also very violent because it's the new, especially since black African Americans, I must admit, must state, because of the necessity of the culture of the gang culture and the prison culture coming out of such. And now you can use them, and once you get them into the system, you can just sit there and just keep tumbling and tumbling. You're not. It's not meant for anyone to get out of. Not for the average person who both does not have the capital or the educational chops to be able to figure out through the purposefully Byzantium process. So what do we do from here? We know where everything's at. Well, the good news is, well, it's actually a lot of good news. We know where every senator stands. We know that in Texas, what, half a million or a million people are being purged from the voter rolls. So you know where the activists have to go. Start knocking on doors. Get people to check. Hey, are you registered to vote? Don't say, are you registered to vote? All right, did you check? Did you know that this law happened? Do you know how to check and do it? It takes you 5-10 minutes. Now you're gonna get a lot of black folks, black African Americans, generational, be like, "Oh yeah, I got to do that." No, no, no. Black folks who know how to reach those people, you need to reach them, because then they're gonna get stubborn and say, "Well, education, our ability to compete on a global stage is at stake. More people competing, the better we get, the more the more wealthy we get, as more capital is flowing through the economy. So right now, the other thing is we have Starbucks. These young folks, they put it out there to form a union. Now, back in the day, yeah, it was a life and death situation. Here, that you believe Starbucks has not, and they have not been keeping their corporate promise to your workers. So each individual store is looking to unionize, and so they're going to try to keep you as individual stores, you know, individual workplaces. So probably the strategy that has to happen, I should say, this is the eighth strategy or attack that I'm looking at. Get as many, and instead of trying to say we're trying to fight, get Starbucks on the unions. No, 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 no. Don't think that way. Try to get as many stores on board. Like, okay, this is what we want. We have 100. We have, well, let's say, okay, 30-hour work weeks, only 4 hours per every 2 weeks as far as slack shifting. In other words, moving your shifts around all the time. 8 hours every 2 weeks or 4 hours once a week. Not cutting your hours so you can during maternity or pre-maternity. Actually getting hours for the vaunted educational benefits, which actually increases efficiency at each store because it creates return customers. And usually it's only the management that's the upper two level management, so it's usually going to stay anyways. And you never know. You have young kids who there's this. It gives this great opportunity. Yes, there's always going to be a high turnover in these types of retail facing, but you're still treating your employees also returns customers because it's usually a neighborhood Starbucks, and we know people are moving every 3 to 5 years now. So for that 5 years, they want to see the same thing. It's so the unionization is saying, okay, these are the things that we need. Now, looking at the contract, but the contract, what you're looking for, plus a bunch of other dumb things. Say, for instance, every meal, every time you go in, you should get a free sandwich, uh, two medium coffees, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Starbucks is going to roll out their lawyers and they're going to roll out their anti union busting stuff. And this is what you're going to do. You're going to say, okay, I'm just going with a number. I said 300. I know it's probably a heck of a lot more, but just using a number. 300 Starbucks stores. We're going to go, okay, guys, we need all of you to get on board. We'll try to recruit all of them. But the whole goal is to not. The first thing is, no, we're trying to get a union. No, first you're going to do is get Starbucks to spend money. And you're like, what? Why would they want to spend money? Well, that's exactly it. The more stores that get on board or start thinking, and there's a chatter, and then they start realizing, oh, got all these other stores thinking about unionizing. The more stores that look like they're going to unionize, the more chatter that comes up, the more money Starbucks has to spend. Your goal is to get as many stores thinking about unionizing so Starbucks spends money. Now, the reason you want Starbucks to spend, we're just going to use the old Shark Tank 10x discount method. So if they spend 50 million, that means to stop the union, that means the value of, at minimum, value of stopping of these employees is 500 million. That's your direct value to the company at that level. That could be tangibly measured. Now, right now, I'm not going to tell you how we're going to do as far as trying as you know what you're going to do with that 500,000, or because they're spending 50 million to stop 300 stores or 50 stores from unionizing. You now have a number. And once you have a number, you have a place in of value. You have a place in reality. So the goal right now is to get Starbucks to spend money on their anti-union efforts, and then for as many people to find out how, try to figure out how much they're spending per store, and then you bring it together, and then you now know how much in totality they view the union, and then you can say, okay, how much is this in capital value? Are we employees not getting out of that? So first things first. So keep plugging away, pushing out on your edit what your demands are. Some of them are absolutely stupid. Doesn't matter. Fluff it. Make it as dumb as big as possible. You're gonna let it whittle away. If you have only these, you know what your core. You know you have your inner core, your outer, your middle, and then your outer core, and then probably another like so about 4 levels of what's important. How those ready to rock and roll. And then over the next year, you got to organize starting today because you need 52 senators who are going to protect the republic, protect voting rights. 52 senators who the Republicans need a shellacking to finally get back to being Republicans and not fascist, which means small business, helping people. They're trying to say that they're the blue collar, white working class party. They've never been a working class party. It's not. It's not in our. It's not in the Republicans' DNA. It's a business party. It got rich after the Civil War. It's an abolitionist party, not a racist party, but it is now after white flight from the Democratic Party due to civil rights. The good thing about this is it shows that everybody knows everyone's in the game, but people really don't realize how that game is played and how they're being played by that game. So we still have to get the human infrastructure, oh, energy infrastructure, small business investment, education investments, future technology. This puts us ahead of the world and makes everyone's life richer. But if they can keep people from being free, then we tank America. And they can keep us fighting amongst ourselves more so than normal. Because, we're Americans, that's what we do. We kick each other's tail. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. You know, as I'm thinking about Mitch McConnell and what he's doing, I don't want to read that book Strongman, but I keep thinking about some of the comments I read. I'll just keep that to myself until I finish reading it. But right now, it looks like a lot of the persons in the right are still in a cult, lying and just straight. But they're good. They're good at they're good at and race baiting. The White House knew it. No, that's how he rolls that into silence Americans, seize power. They're telling you exactly what they're up to. They were domestic terrorists. They're insurrectionists. They tried to overthrow the government, and you're whitewashing it, and then calling it patriotism. So the only way out for a lot of these politicians is to obfuscate, make a lot of noise, move the goalpost, split the emotion and the logic. Same thing with Kathleen Kennedy and the Kardashians. It's the same behavior. Once you see the behavior, it's like, oh, you're about to do this. Right? That's the world is what we have to do to build a better future. You know, they're bigots or externalizers. Main thing is, as we're seeing with Kennedy, and it was shown, she already gave away her main thing. Just watch all the three Star Wars movies and the sequels, and you're like, oh, I wonder how she thinks. Boom, boom, boom. She's gonna do this. She's doing the exact same thing. Her the Kardashians, her bread is buttered on Americans seeing themselves, Black and African Americans seeing themselves as being poor, and doing the actions, and then saying, well, okay, this is their king. That's what they're doing right now in LA. I am doing something else. I'm gonna go live my life the way I wish to. But if the good news is, like I said, voting rights, Black African Americans now realize the importance of voting rights on their future. And it's not just with a normal, they're just going to be racist or they're going to be bigoted. This is different. This is a lot different. So, anyways, that's this year. This is the 24th. It's been a while.